have so many gracious and talented people in our congregation who are sharing their skills and their talents with us, because we all need a little diversion these days. So the only announcement I'm going to make is the next program coming up. We always do coming attractions. Alex Van Dyke, who is the chef at the Perch at the Peacock Inn, who also happens to be Sherry Meyer's nephew, is going to be doing a program on the 31st at 2 o'clock, making home cooked meals taste like professionals or something like that. So look for the email about that. And I'm going to pass this along to Mindy, who's then going to introduce Peter, and then Peter will have the rest of the evening. So thank you for coming.
Okay. So you have to pin.
Oh, and I should have asked everyone to please mute themselves, other than Mindy and Peter.
So thank you for all for coming. I'm Mindy Langer, and Peter has asked me to introduce him, so I'm going to briefly do that. Peter Smith is a native of Scotland, and he's been an avid woodworker for years. He's made many pieces at the Jewish Center over the time. Most recently, the portable ark that we're now using to bring the Torah to bar mitzvah families who, because of the pandemic, have to have their b'nai mitzvah in their houses. He also made the handles on the big ark in the sanctuary, and he's made the Torah table for the Bet Midrash, among many other things that he has created and repaired for us over the years. And his favorite field of woodworking is wood turning, in particular making wooden bowls, which is an acknowledged art form. And we're going to see how he has created bowls of all shapes and sizes using a variety of hardwoods, native ones found in the area, either from trees that have come down in his yard or in other people's, and sometimes buying the wood, but mostly finding it. And in his workshop in Princeton, he uses a wide variety of tools to make found logs into one-of-a-kind wooden pieces. And you're going to see how he does that. He's going to show us the equipment and the process and the final products. His bowls are in many collections and homes across the country. I have one here. He's also a teacher of woodworking. My son spent a summer with him as his mentor, and this is what I got from that. And we're going to review the techniques involved and see how many different kinds of bowls can be brought magically out of how many different kinds of logs. If you have questions, please put them in the chat, and we're not going to interrupt Peter's presentation, but afterwards there'll be time for questions, and I will read out the questions to Peter so he can answer them. So thank you very much, and now we'll hear from Peter.
Thank you. I'm going to go into spotlight mode, which means I am the main focus here. This is very good for my ego. But anyway, so here we are, and thank you all for coming, and I'll try to show you as much as I can. The whole presentation should run about an hour. I have a lot of material to cover. I've got my dining room table is covered with bowls right now. So I'll try to show you as many of those as I can and explain them. Bowls are, wooden bowls in particular, are very attractive, and there's a lot that goes into them. So let's dive right in. First of all, I'm going to talk about bowls in general. And then I'm going to talk about the wood. And then I'm going to talk about the turning process, how we actually make them. Then I'm going to talk about some variations in bowls that we could have. And then finally, we'll talk about some of the design and aesthetic elements of the bowls. So bowls are ubiquitous. They're everywhere. They're as old as mankind. Since we evolved from hunter-gatherers, we needed something to put our gathering in, and bowls are the answer. So when archaeologists dig up a site, an ancient site, they all turn up lots of pottery, shards of pottery, sometimes whole vessels. And most of those vessels are made from clay, because clay does not deteriorate even if you bury it. And so bowls and vessels and pots are very common. For example, I have one here. This is a small bowl. This is from the Ban Chiang site in northern Thailand, which I visited many years ago. It is now a UNESCO World Heritage Site because they have so many bowls buried there in the area. And this is the design. They're rather crude ceramics. You can't really tell for that, but they're rather crude. But they all have this ochre design here, spirals and stuff. I personally, I think it's very pretty, but I don't think this is an original because I bought it in the gift shop. So I think that's a replica. So but it's probably the originals are 5,000 to 6,000 years old. All right, fast forward a few thousand years and we come to the Japanese ceramic people who are ceramic turners. I have some look at this bowl here. This is one that's made, this is from the Sung Dynasty. That's an original it's probably 500 years old. It's just an exquisite, very delicate, beautiful bowl with this green celadon glaze. So I'm not going to talk about this too much, but you can just, this is beautifully done. It's just gorgeous. Here's another one with celadon, but it's a darker celadon. This is from Korea. It's got nice designs around it. And again, this is probably 500 years old. So bowls are as old as human beings. And as I say, they're all over the place. There's a Japanese one and a Korean one. Here's another Japanese one. It's, I really like this one. It's fairly big. It's very useful size. The design is very, very pretty. The blue is very strong. I just like the shape of it. You look, it's got a nice curve here. It's called an OG curve. It's an S shape like this and a nice foot. So these Japanese, they're hard to beat for elegant design. This one says it's a microwave safe, so I don't think it's an antique. So bowls, so we've seen clay ones, we've seen ceramic ones. Here's a couple of glass ones. Here's one from Corning. I'm sure we all have some of these for our cereal. Here's another glass one that I have. This is made in Turkey. It's really quite a nice shape and very useful. So we talked ceramic glass. Here's one made from stone. This is made in Pakistan. I don't know what the stone is, but it's gorgeous, gorgeous stone here. Very nice. Here's one made from metal. So all materials you could use to make bowls. Here's one made from metal. This one's from Alaska here. And an unusual one I have from a coconut shell. And it's got a little foot glued onto the bottom, so it holds up very nicely. I don't know what you would use. I don't know if you could put soup in here. I don't know how the coconut survives contact with water. Because one of the problems we have with wood is, of course, it's not very friendly with water. So those are a whole different series of bowls, quite nice ones. Here's a wooden one. I got this. This is from the Philippines. It's acacia wood. This is 40 years old. We use this almost daily, and it's still going strong. It's just the right size. It's not terribly elegant. It's a bit heavy on the foot here. The foot's too wide. The curve here is a bit, it's not very subtle. It's okay. It's certainly usable, but it's not as elegant as it might be. So this is a wooden bowl. But the reason we don't find wooden bowls in archaeological sites is that wood rots. So if you bury wood in the ground, it doesn't last very long. So it's a problem. Also, wood can't hold wet things. So if you have a wooden bowl, you really can't use it for soup or cereal because they disturb the wood and they can crack it and stain it and all sorts of stuff. So wood, it's just a difficult medium to work with, which is why we don't have many wood bowls that are old. So I have a couple. Here's one. This is an old bowl. This is probably about 100 years old. It's maple, but you can see it's really lost its grain. You can hardly tell what's going on. In fact, there was a crack down here. I sealed this, and I don't know if you can tell, but it's warped. You can see it's a little bit scooped here. And if you look in here, there's a terrible stain in here from something. Goodness knows what all went in here. This is made in, there's a stamp on the bottom, Munising. There's a lot of these bowls. Munising was a factory in northern Michigan, right on the shores of Lake Superior. And they had a machine shop there, and they turned out lots and lots of bowls like this, all from maple, all of this shape. And you can still find these around in antique stores. And some people in Princeton I visited still have a couple of these things around. So it's very utilitarian. It's seen better days, but it's okay. We can use this one. I have another bowl here. This is a nice one. Look at this one. This is a maple. I made this over 30 years ago. It has 2 beads on here. These are called beads. They're very handy for holding the bowl with. They give you extra secure grip. This one, as I say, is over 30 years old, and we've used it all the time for salads, particularly if we have a dinner party and you need a salad to go in here. It's a big bowl. So, but it's very nice. And I don't know if you can see, there's some nice grain in here and so on. So this is 30 years old and still going well. It develops a very nice patina over time. And we certainly get out mileage out of that one. Here's another one I have. This is a fairly recent one. This is a big bowl. I don't know if you can see this. It's walnut. There you are. It's really quite nice. It's quite light, actually. I got this when Hurricane Sandy came through and took down a whole lot of trees, including one walnut tree by a neighbor down the road. And she came and asked me if I wanted to walnut wood. I love walnut. And so I made a whole lot of bowls. And this is one that I still have around. But it's really big. But could you imagine the piece of wood that I started with this to hollow this out? It was a huge block of walnut. Very hard to find and very nice. But so it's a really nice bowl. And finally, of the bowls I have this one here. Oh, this is a ridiculously big bowl. This is the one that was on the flyer. You see I have some resin built in here because there's a big split in it. I'll show you a picture of this later. It again, it has a bead around it to hold it for holding, but it's really too big. It's 17 inches wide. I don't know why I keep making these things. Again, a huge piece of wood to start with this. I call these bowls, these big ones, I call them Thanksgiving bowls, because the only time you'd ever use them is at a Thanksgiving party or a Thanksgiving meal, or you have lots of people around. Otherwise, they're just too much. I'm going to stop making these big ones. About 12 inches, a 12-inch bowl is about the right size. Here's one that I also have. I was going to show. This is 12 inches, 11 and a half inches, 12 inches. This is from Cherry, and it's a fairly recent one I've made, and it's quite nice. A nice feel to it, nice shape. It's got a nice curve here. The bottom flat is a little wider than it might be. It could be a little shorter, smaller to hold up, but it's quite nice. You can see that there's some, at this end here, there was some rotting in the wood. When wood, if you don't catch the wood soon enough, it starts to crack and rot. So this one is beginning to go. I have a trick when I find this kind of wood. You can seal it up with resins and stabilize it. I like to put in turquoise inlay here. So I have turquoise powder that I mix with epoxy, put it into the cracks and the holes, let them set, and then sand it down to match the flow, and you get these nice highlights of turquoise. I think they're very attractive. I can't do that with many bowls because many bowls don't really have the suitable holes, but when they are, they're fine. So that's a very nice bowl. Now I'll come back to this one as a good example of a bowl going forward. Right, so this is cherry, nice cherry wood. So those are some of my working bowls that I have, and quite useful. I've got some notes here, so forgive me when I go through this. Yeah, one thing with, when you're making a clay bowl, if you're making a clay bowl like this, if you don't like what's happening, you can just punch it down and start all over again. When you're working with wood, you can't do that. Once you've cut a shape, you're stuck with it. So it's a little bit more, you have to be a little more careful when you're doing it. So everybody asks me, where do I get my wood from? Where did this lump of cherry, where did that lump of walnut came from? Well, I told you where that one came from. Same for this cherry, somebody locally cut it down. So all the wood that I have is local wood, and I call it found wood. I never buy it. Well, I bought some pieces once in a while, but I never buy wood. I scavenge wood from people who are taking there's trees coming down all over the place. And you just have to find the right one when they've cut it up to size. And most of the time they'll just put it on the curbside to be taken away by the municipality, in which case it's free. You just pick up as much as you care to. Sometimes if they still have it on their plan, you can go up and ask them nicely if they could spare a couple of logs. And the deal would be that if you get a couple of logs, that you will make them a bowl as a souvenir. Sometimes you've heard the phrase ambulance chaser, where lawyers chase after ambulances to sue the culprits who've caused the problem. I sometimes think I'm a bowl chaser when I chase after a wood firm and say, oh, you're taking that tree down, let me know, and I'll come and get some wood, and I'll give the owner, if they're interested, I'll give them a bowl. So local wood, when it comes down off a tree, is called green wood. It's very fresh, it's very wet, it's heavy, it's wet, and it's really heavy because it's full of water. So you have to be very careful with it, because if you're too late and using it, it begins to split and crack, and sometimes the cracks can just destroy the whole log. You can't use it anymore. So if I am cutting if I'm cutting a tree down, or a tree is cut down and I'm going to make a bowl from it, I will wrap the piece of wood. We call it a blank, a bowl blank. I'm going to wrap the blank in a plastic bag to keep it from drying out. And it keeps in a plastic bag for a few weeks. But even then, it's, the sooner you can get to it, the better. And we'll talk more about this. But when you're dealing with wood, because it's a natural product, it's a natural thing, which is why we like it, because each piece of wood is unique. They're all beautiful colors and grains, and we really like this. That's why we have wood floors, not concrete floors. But if you're dealing with wood, there's also, you never know what you're going to find when you cut open a log and see what's in it. For example, I find a lot of wood, if I'm a bit too slow getting to them, get drilled by insects. So there are insect holes coming in. I don't have any examples on hand, but I often have to have a needle and poke out a worm, a squiggling worm, and toss it away. So the holes that come in there are actually quite attractive. They give a nice finish to a nice interesting part to the wood. You get rotten sometimes if you're not quite careful, the wood will rot, and you will get rotten sections, and if it becomes too soft, you can't turn it because it's too soft. So you can stabilize it with super glue or epoxy. That will work sometimes, but you're fighting against it all the time. I should have said most of the woods that we use are hardwoods. There's the oaks, the cherries, the ash. There's a lot of ash around now because of the emerald ash borer took down a lot of ash trees, so there's a lot of ash around. Cherry, walnut, maple, elm. Most of the elm trees are gone too, but I use elm as well. It's a very tough wood to work with. You can't really use the softwoods, the pines, and so on, because they're too soft. They don't really hold the shape very well. The wood is too uneven to deal with, so we stay away from the softwoods. Even this cedar bowl I saw, cedar is a relatively soft wood, but it's enough, there's enough substance to it that I can actually make bowls from it, and it's got a beautiful color. But on the whole, I don't think a cedar bowl will last very long, because it won't take a lot of beating in day-to-day kitchen life. All right, so how do we actually turn a bowl? Well, I'm going to show you some pictures. I'm going to talk for quite a bit, and then I'm going to show you some pictures that will help to make it clearer what I'm talking about, because a picture is worth 1,000 words. So when bowl turning, you're working on a lathe, which is a machine that spins the bowl. And that's what we do. And a wood lathe, I'm going to show you a picture here. But because these blocks of wood, the blanks, the big ones, are really heavy, you have to be very careful in case they come off the lathe, because if they can come off the lathe, they can hit you in the face and cause a lot of damage. So it's mandatory to wear a face mask, a plastic face mask over your face when you're doing it. And I'm so used to doing that now, I can't turn on the lathe without putting on my face mask. And there's many a time that I'm grateful for having that instinct, because the bowl has come apart or come off the lathe. But safety when you're turning, because you're dealing with fast turning and a lot of centrifugal force, and you're trying to make very elegant bowls, it can be tricky. So safety is a top concern that we all can working with. Now, when you've got your wooden blank, I'll show you a picture in a minute of one. When you've got your wooden blank and you're going to turn it down to a bowl, there's two approaches to do this. The first one is called once turning, in which you take the blank and you take it, you put it on the lathe, it spins away. You take a chisel, here's a chisel I've got, or a gouge it's called, here's one. I don't know if you can see this. Really sharp, you have to keep sharpening these things. And you dig it in and scoop it out and shape it using this thing here. So this is a bowl gouge. It's one of the famous favorite tools, very widely used bowl gouge. Here's another one I have. This is a new tool that just came on the market a couple of years ago. And what it is, it's got a square stock, so it sits on the support very well. And it's got this cutter at the end, which is made from carbide. So it's very strong, very sharp, and doesn't wear down very well, very easily. And if you want, you can unloose the screw and move it around and get a fresh turning face. So this is one of my favorite tools. This really works very well here. So you start that, you turn the bowl down and you turn the outside of it. You turn a foot on it to hold it in the lathe. You turn it around, you scoop out the middle, and you've got a bowl. But this is wet wood. You take it off the lathe, you cut it off, you clean up the foot, and you leave it aside. And as it dries out, it will warp and sometimes crack, but it will warp and change shape a little bit. And you never know what you're going to get. So I don't really like this approach. The once turning is a bit tricky because you never know what you're going to get. And on the other hand, it's pretty easy to do because the wood is soft, it's very wet, and you can make a bowl very quickly. So I did one. I've got one here to show you. This is one. This is a once turned maple bowl. And I don't know if you can see, it is actually oval shaped. It's warped into an oval shape. You can't really tell from here. And I don't know if you notice, you can't tell either because there's a bump here where it's warped a little bit. This is a little bit higher both sides here, where the wood is. So this is okay. I can do this. I can sell this bowl. It's a nice size too, and it feels pretty lightweight. But again, I really don't do a lot of this because you never know how this one turned out all right. It's pretty easy. You never know how it's going to turn out, and sometimes they twist and they warp too much that you can't do anything with them, so they can't use them. So that's a once turn. However, if you have just the right bowl, the right piece of wood, and you want to make it, you want to take advantage of this warping business, you can turn a bowl that is very thin with a little foot on it and let it warp, and you turn out with something like this. I hope you can see this. Look at the warping on this one here. This is a piece of crab apple. It was very thin here. It's actually got a hole in it, which you don't need because this is totally useless. It's just a decorative piece. You couldn't put soup in here or yogurt in here. You wouldn't do that. But anyway, and you see the nice, you can see the nice little foot it stands on. So I would use this as a nice decorative piece. And I call these potato chip bowls. All right. So that's another way to take advantage of that. But in general, we don't do that. What we normally do is called twice turning. We turn the wet blank down to a rough shape, and we leave it thick, about 1 inch thick. And you turn it down, turn it to 1 inch thick, scoop out the middle, get the middle, and then you let it dry out for 3 to 4 months. And here's one. This is a piece of maple. You see, I've turned a foot on it so that it will grip by the chocolate I'm going to show you in a minute. And you see, it's because it's wet, it's already got some mold on here, but all this will come off when I clean it up. And you'll see it's really warped. This one is not cracking, which is good. Sometimes they crack, but this is warped. You can see the rim there is all got a wave in it. I leave this for 3 or 4 months. This one's actually 5 months old now, so I could actually turn this down. So this is coming up on the top of the list to be cleaned up and turned into a real bowl. Then anyway, after 5 months, when it's warped and stabilized, you put it on the lathe and you true it up with my chisels that I showed you until you get the right shape and the right thickness. And then you varnish it and wax it, and then you cut it off the lathe, and then you have your bowl. That's twice turning. It obviously takes twice as long as the once turning, but you're sure you have a stable bowl, and you have time to consider the proper shape. So that's what most of the bowls I make are like that. So that's the twice turning. Yep. So let me show you, I've got some pictures to make it a little bit clearer what I'm trying to do here. So let me share my screen. I don't want to bounce around too much between sharing screens and talking or showing bowls. So I'll just give you a few slides right now, and then I'll come back and we'll talk about more bowls. So let me share my screen. Do I have to have permission to do this? Mindy? Just want to share my screen. Oh, here we are. All right. Okay. So I've got some PowerPoint slides here. Okay. So this is what we're talking about. So we've talked about bowls in general. We've talked about the wood. I've just been over that. We've talked about turning, and we'll show you some more of that. Then we're going to talk about the variations that we can do with bowls, and then some of the design elements, which is the important part. So when you cut a log down, if this is a cross section of a log, right? See the annual rings going around there. The pith in the middle there, the center of the log, is the most unstable part of the log. The stress and the fibers in there are very stressed and they're very volatile, so they will crack and change there. So we want to get rid of the pith. You can't make a bowl with pith in it. You can, but it doesn't last very long. It starts to split from there. So you take a chainsaw. You have to use a chainsaw to do this. A lot of work here. You take a chainsaw and you cut out this section and you throw it away. This is firewood. You let it dry out and you can burn it. If you're lucky, depending on the wood and the size of it, you can maybe get some small bowls out of the two side parts here. But the whole idea is to get rid of this. And then we're going to get 3 bowls out of this. We can cut this one in half and we'll get 3 bowls out of this log here. So that's the basic thing. So here's one. It's a real log that we've cut in half, right down the vertical there. You see the pith, which should be here, is pretty much gone. I'm not sure if this is part of the pith. I can't tell from this. The bowl is going to be cut from here, right? Most people think that I make the bowl from the cross section in that way, but no, that doesn't work because you can't get rid of the pith. But this is what we do. This is where the bowl is going to go. Now you'll see here, I'm just looking for one of my samples here. Oh, I have it. You see the grain at the end here, down here, the grain here is pretty strong and nice, and likewise at the other end, and in the sides, there's no grain. So when I scoop out all the wood in the middle here, then I'm going to have heavy grain on one end and heavy grain on the other end. So if I can show you, if I stop sharing, I can show you a bowl where this is obvious. So if I take this, like this, you can see I got heavy, this is a piece of maple, very strong heartwood in the middle here, no color here and color here, because the wood was running, the grain was running, the heavy heartwood in here, but it's all scooped out. So this is a piece of maple with very strong coloring to it, but either very dramatic, very attractive, but not unusual to do that. Okay, back to share screening, bear with me. Okay, where we are. Oh no, this is what I want. Here we are. All right, so that's what we do. Now the trick, of course, is, see, I have a lathe here, right? Here's a picture of a lathe. This is a wood lathe. You can get metal lathes, which work on the same principle. They're slightly different design. Anyway, you've got 2 parts. There's the headstock. This has got a big screw here. This is where you screw on the bowl blank. There's a motor here that spins this headstock very quickly. You have an emergency stop here because if things go wrong and you want to see what's happening, you have to stop it. You have a tailstock, which is got got a point on it, and you can put these together. You don't use the tailstock very much when you're bowl turning. You use this when you're making, for example, a baseball bat or a table leg, and you go between the headstock and the tailstock. You put the piece of wood there, and you can turn it down to the shape you want. When you're using a lathe like this for bowls, you don't need the tailstock so much, although it is useful sometimes. If you have a big bowl, you can take it up and use it to support it and force it into the headstock. How do we attach the wood to the headstock? Well, here's three ways to do it. The most common one is on the right. It's called a faceplate. It's got screws there you can see that I screw in. So this sits on top of the surface of the bowl. This will become the surface of the bowl, the top bit. You screw that in, then the screw this here goes into the headstock. So this is very common. This is very widely used when you're first roughing out a bowl. When you've got a bowl down to the size that you want and you can turn a foot on it, you can use this here, which is called a jaw chuck. Go away. And oops, where was I? Sorry. This is a jaw chuck. These jaws can be turned and clamped into the grip the foot of the bowl. The jaws are interchangeable. You can make them smaller or bigger, depending on the size of the wood. So that's this is very, very useful tool here. And then you have what is called a screw chuck, in which you have a really special screw here that you can drill a hole in the blank of the bowl and it will screw in there. And this screw here has very wide flanges on it, so that it really holds the wood very tightly. So I used to use this a lot. I use this a lot now, and the faceplate for big bowls. So let's see what else we've got to do. Here's a guy, this is my landscaper, taking down an ash tree that was in my front yard. This is about 3 years ago. You may think there's a whole ash tree above that, but it's not. This is the top. There's a cut here where the rest of the tree has already come down. He's just taken the final piece of the chunk out. This was a shame because it was a beautiful tree. It loved the shade, but it was dying. So we couldn't do much with it. We had to take it down. We had to get permission to take it down, but we did. I asked him to cut up me some chunks. Here you have the bowl chunks. There's about 16 pieces here. You can see there's a bit of a chainsaw mark here that is no big deal. All this stuff can be turned away. This is ash lying out here, but I can't leave it here for long. I said it starts to dry out and start splitting, so I need to move quickly, get it into plastic bags. And so I did. I'll show you later what I did with this. First of all, these things, you need to cut off the corners because you want to make your bowl blank as circular as you can. So you cut off the corners, and sometimes at the top there, you cut off a bit. So this will be, the faceplate will go on here, the face you're seeing. And here it is attached to a lathe. Now this is a big bowl lathe. I'll talk about this a little bit more, but it's a big heavy lathe that I use because this piece of wood is, 40 or 50 pounds, very heavy. It's hard work to get it to where it is like now. So we're going to put it on here, and this down here is the tool rest. This bit down here is the tool rest where my chisel is going to sit on here and dig into the wood and true it up. So I think I have a video. This is one of my students working on a bowl, truing it up. You see how it goes? You'll notice this is the square chisel that I was showing you earlier with the carbide tip to it. It's very, very useful for truing this thing up. So you keep working at that for a while. Okay. You see she's wearing her face mask because there's going to be shavings flying all over the place. So after a while, we get down to this shape here. Now this is intermediate. It's not full because it's not fully done, because you can see there's a lot of bark on the underside there. And we don't want the bark there because the bark will just flake off eventually. And there's also some flats at the top and at the side there where we haven't quite got it to the round. So we have to keep working on this. But the more round it becomes, the easier it is to work, because you can make it go a little bit faster and cleaner cutting. So we keep working on this until we get to this. And now you see the shape is there. It's round shape. It's going to be a nice round bowl. It's coming in a little bit at the top of the bowl. And here is, we call a tenon. It's for the jaw chuck. It's going to grasp onto that. So that's easy to put on, but you have to measure it just so. And you can already see we're going to have bits of, you can see the grain coming out of this. It's a piece of maple. So that's it. Now you turn it around, you take it off, you take off the faceplate, you turn it around, you put the screw chuck on, and you put this in and screw the foot onto it until you get something like this. And then you have to scoop out the middle. And there's two ways to do that. You can just laboriously scoop it all out with your chisel. Or what I prefer to do is called coring. I use this coring chisel here, which has got a curve on it and a very sharp end, and it goes into the side here and cuts round. And I can actually get that piece of wood out of the middle to make a new bowl from. So rather than turn the inside of the bowl into just a whole pile of shavings, I can get a second bowl out of it. So this is me working on this. This is not so difficult, but it's still fairly hard to do. And here's the bowl that's coming out of the middle. You can see this one is still very thick. I have to now take the daughter bowl. This is the mother bowl. If I take the daughter bowl away, I have to true this up and clean up a lot of this here, and then leave it to dry for 4 or 5 months. And then I take the daughter, I turn a foot onto that and put it in the, now I've got smaller jaws. I can turn it, I put it onto here. So I true this up. If I'm really ambitious, I can make another daughter out of this, a granddaughter out of this bowl here, but usually it's not really worth it. And I just turn this into shavings. With the result for all these bowls, well, here's the mother and the daughter, and they'll be drying for 4 or 5 months, and they'll turn into really nice. This will be a nice salad bowl. This will be a really nice peanut bowl, or something for the table. A lot of shavings. Look at this is one session of 6 bowls, and I got some like 200 gallons of shavings out of this thing. So the garbage guys take them away quite happily. So coming back to my ash, so I go through this process with the ash here. I have to cut off the corners. I got my landscaping guys to do that because there was a lot of chainsawing that I couldn't quite face. And then I turn them down to the rough blank, comme ça. And you see here, they all are drying out for 3 or 4 months, 4 or 5 months. They're beginning to crack, but you can see there's still a lot of the bowls here are different shapes. As you're turning them down, you can, that's when you do the rough shape, you can get some idea of what shape you would finally make the bowl into here. So you just keep doing this, and then you take each one of these and you put it back on the lathe, true it up, varnish it, and there's your salad bowl. Take it off the lathe and clean it up. When I'm doing a series like this, a lot like this, I have a mantra, which is 1 bowl a day. So there's, 20 there. So that's, 20 days, three or 4 weeks to get to this level. And then when I clean them, when I start making them the final form, it takes another bowl a day, another 3 or 4 weeks. They're pretty quick to do in terms of hours, but it's a lot of work. But when it's finished, lo and behold, look at this. There's all those ash bowls all lined up. They're really beautiful. Ash is a very nice light color like this. And you can see this big one in the at the right there has got some turquoise in it because it was splitting. Here's one that I also made. It wasn't for the same series, but it's another ash bowl from another ash tree. This was a wedding present for somebody. So this is very nice. It's 12 inches wide and make a lovely wedding mix. I like to say I've never had to buy a wedding present or a housewarming present or a holiday present for years because I got boxes of these things in the basement. All right, here's the cedar. You can see the one on the left, I have got a mother, a baby, another daughter, and a granddaughter out of that. And then on the right, I've got 4 bowls out of it. The middle bowl there, the small one, is fairly shallow, but it'll turn into a nice bowl. The one on the left here, this one here, is the big bowl. Like this here is on the lathe. You'll see the jaw chuck is holding it by the tenon here, this foot here. You'll notice there's a big gash down here. That's a fault in the tree. I wasn't quite sure what to do with this. That's a lot of epoxy and turquoise to put in there. So I actually decided not to use the whole bowl, but I was to cut it off here, more or less, and true it up that way. And that reduced the crack there. And that here we have, this is the bowl I showed you earlier. And you see down at the bottom here in the front, you used to see the turquoise gash, and there's some other turquoise gashes at the side, at the back side as well. This is my 17-inch Thanksgiving bowl. So that's where it came from. This cedar tree that came down locally. This is my lathe. This is the one I use. It's about 40 years old. There's a headstock on the left, the tailstock on the right, and the tool rest in the middle here. And you see up in top there, there's a dust extractor. When I'm sanding it, I get a lot of dust, what I don't really need to breathe, so I have it sucked out by that machine. This is an unusual design. It's a very functional lathe. It's a Victorian-based design, and they give you the headstock, the tailstock, and the tool rest, and you actually make the lathe bed, which is 2 big chunks or 2 big planks of oak there. Then you can get the legs and so on and put it all together. At the far left is the motor control where I can turn the speed up. At the back, you can just see it. There's the motor on a belt that will turn the headstock at appropriate speeds. You can get a sense. There's a lot of practice involved in that. After a while, you know what speed to turn things at. Here's my tools. I often think it's like a dentist's office. I got a whole set of tools that I can poke and prod and scrape with as I need them. So they are very handy, just tied onto the end of screwed onto the end of the lathe there. And this is the big lathe that you saw earlier. This is my bowl lathe. I do not have a tailstock for this. I don't need it. It's really heavy duty because these big blocks of wood are really heavy, and when they're turning, the whole lathe will shake. So, and to keep that down to a minimum, this lathe here, the red cabinet, is filled with sand. So this thing is unmovable. Technically unmovable, but sometimes it does want to walk a little bit if I have a really heavy bowl on there. Using a faceplate, not the screw chuck wouldn't hold a big bowl, but the faceplate will. Although, as I said, sometimes they fly off, so you have to be careful. So my bowl lathe, and then the other one for finishing. So variations on the theme. Wood turning is really very popular these days. There's a whole craft movement dealing with lathes and bowls. Part of the reason for that is the technological advances in bowl lathes and tools. As I said, that one I showed you, the square one, is only a couple of years old. They keep improving this. The modern lathes, not the one that I have, the modern lathes are, they're not cheap. They're, $3,000 or $4,000, but they're really solid and they really don't shake very much, and they're very powerful and very accurate. I keep thinking I'd like to buy one, but I don't have $4,000 to buy one, and I don't know what to do with my old one. So I'm gonna, I'll just suffer it out. It's not that bad. It works quite nicely. Anyway, so there's a whole craft movement. You can go to any craft show, and there's always 2 or 3 guys that will have a stall full of bowls and woodworking. I've done craft shows before. I don't do them anymore. It's just hardly worth the effort for me. But there's a lot of it out there. They even have, there's a national journal. There's a national organization for wood turning. They have a major exposition every year. I've been to a few of those, where you pick up a lot of tips and see the new technology that's coming on. Some of the creativity is just really stunning. There's real artists out there. I don't count myself in that. I'm just a wood turner. I just make solid bowls. But some of the guys make some really amazing creations. So and here's some variations. This is some of the things that people are doing. If we remember this picture, which is the pith, and we didn't talk about these two parts at the bottom, but if you do this, if you look at one of these, you get two bowls out of this. But in itself, you can take advantage of the shape. If you cut off that part there and put the headstock on there, so that becomes the bottom of the bowl, and you dig in here, you get what is called a natural edge bowl. Here's an example of one. Really unusual, very nice, very attractive. And you know, I could spend time explaining it, but you can get the idea. This is what happens with it. So that's one variation. A lot of natural edge bowls are out there. I really like them. They have the nice wave. They're really naturally looking and attractive. This is only a small one. I don't know where it's only about 7 inches across at the top, but it's fine. I use it as a pen holder on my desk. So that's one. Another one, a variation, is called a ring bowl. And this was an old breadboard that someone gave me, a walnut breadboard. They said, I don't need it, they said. And I said, oh, well, what am I going to do with this? Can't make a bowl out of a breadboard. And then I got to thinking, and I thought, well, I can make a ring bowl out of it. And what you do is you actually bandsaw, or you can turn rings off the breadboard. You put the breadboard on the lathe, you cut rings out like this. Then you stack all the rings together and glue them up tightly. And when the glue dries, you have a very rough bowl like this. But then when you actually come in with a chisel and clean it up and get rid of all this, you end up with this lovely bowl. That's a really nice bowl from an old breadboard. They're sometimes called economy bowls because you get a whole bowl out of just one little square of wood. But it takes a little bit of fussing because you have to get the angles right and the joining is all right. So, but anyway, that's one. So I have some more variations here, which I'll show you if I can stop sharing. I think that's the end of this. Yes, I'm going to stop sharing now. And so let me just show you this. This is another natural edge bowl here, this one. In this one, I managed to keep the bark on it. So when I scooped it out here, it was fairly round here, and you don't have that big dip in it, but it's a natural edge, but you have saved the bark. Now you have to be careful because the bark is fairly easily removed, so I usually super glue this into place with thin super glue to firm it up, but here's a natural edge bowl. It's very nice. So that's one variation. Here's another ring bowl. Here's another ring bowl. Here, you can't really, I don't know if you can't really tell this is ring bowl. This is fairly old. I'm just, what date is it? 2008. So that's what, 12, 13 years ago. This is a really nice piece of wood. It's called Paduke. It's an exotic. It's not you can't find this on the sidewalk. You have to go to the hardware store. You have to go to the wood store and get a piece of Paduke. And if you get a nice block this size, a nice square that size, you can't get a block of wood of Paduke for any reasonable cost. So I just buy a plank of wood, say 1 inch thick. And then I cut it into rings, laminate the rings and turn it through. And here we have this beautiful Paduke bowl. You can't really, the rings are kind of lost now. You can see them a little bit, but they are kind of lost. And this is a gorgeous bowl. So that's a ring bowl, and you saw the walnut one. All right, so let me put this over here, excuse me. Another common bowl to make is a vase like this. Here's a vase. This is a cherry vase. This is an old one. I'm not sure. I stopped putting dates in them. This is 30 years old. You can't put water in here, as we've discussed, because water and wood just don't agree. But you could put dry flowers in something like this. It's also an attractive bowl if you want to keep it on your shelf. If you want to take it to another extreme, you can actually make what I call hollow spheres. Here's a hollow sphere. This is a piece of apple wood. It's about 6 or 7 inches high. And look at the hole that I come in with a scoop, a sharp chisel with a bend in it, and I scoop the whole thing out right down to here. This is very lightweight all the way through. This is not very useful for anything except maybe dried flowers, but as a piece of wood, as an attractive piece of wood, this is very nice. This is called a hollow sphere. They're not easy to do. I don't want to tell you how many times I've scooped this out and it's come right out the edge. And I had to throw it away. If I'm going from vases, another thing I can do, if you excuse me, I'm gonna get this bowl here. So rather than having a closed sphere, you can actually make a platter. This is really, I don't know where you draw the line between platters and bowls. This is a platter. This is box elder. It's got this red stain in it, natural. It's a fungus. This is box elder, a big platter. Right, you could serve on that. Or I have a piece, let's see, looking at this here. So that's a platter. I don't do many platters, but I've made some. Here's a segmented bowl, right? Look at this one. This is an Escher-like pattern, cubes, and it's just a simple bowl, but I designed with the dark wood, the white wood, the dark wood, the light wood, and the cherry. And here, it's walnut, maple, and cherry, each little cube, and you glue them all together. And if you take care, you can get them all lined up like this. And then you turn this down, and you have a Escher like bowl. This is segmented turning. You're not using a whole block of wood. You lay up segments. It's similar to the ring bowl. You lay they lay up the rings and press them into place. This one, you layer up these cube-like things into that. I have another one here, which is a segmented bowl. You can see there's different segments of wood around here. Walnut, padauk, oak. There's some ash in here, something, I'm not sure, I can't remember. And cherry at the top. But this interesting layer here, this layer is about 1 inch thick of epoxy resin, in which I've embedded a whole lot of crayons, colored pencils and crayons, and then turned the whole thing down. So you get this very interesting feature there. And this is, you can't really tell from where I'm at right now, but this is actually fairly transparent. You can see through here. And you build this thing up and then you threw it out. And you get this interesting segmented bowl. People are doing a lot of work with resins now. I'm intending to get into this a little bit more myself, but there's only so much time I have. So segmented bowls, what else do I have? I think those are the main variations that I'd like to mention to you. Yep. All right, now I'm going to talk finally, the important part, the design elements to this. When you're making a bowl, let's look at this one. Here's a nice piece of, this is cedar. When you're making a bowl, what do you look for? The first thing, there are 2 things to look for when you're picking up a wooden bowl. The first one I call the lift, which is the shape of the bowl and how it comes off the table. So something like this comes off the table. You can see it's got a nice smooth curve from here right up to the rim. And there's a small foot here, and it balances very nicely. So this has got a good lift that comes off the table. So that's the first thing you look for. What is the shape? How does it come off the table? It's very, excuse me, it's aesthetically very pleasing to have a nice shape. And there's dozens of shapes. You can have curved ones, you can have bowed ones, all sorts of shapes you can have out of this. Different ones where it comes up and then comes like this and so on. Where was that? Yeah, anyway. So that's the first thing you look for. The second thing you look for, or you feel when you get a bowl, is I call the heft, which is the weight of the bowl and the tactile sensation of holding it. So that's something you cannot judge just by looking at it. You got to pick it up and feel it. Oh, it's called stroking the wood. It's really, this is well polished. It's very satisfying to do that. And the thickness of the bowl is important. And this uniform thickness, you can feel with your fingertips are very sensitive to this. You can feel the uniformity of the thickness down the bowl. the thickness with the wall opposed to the foot. Sometimes you make a really thin, I've seen people make really thin bowls, which are remarkably easy, difficult to do, but they're the thinness of them sort of compromises the integrity of the wood, and they will crack or not be very useful. So you have to have a certain thickness, but you don't want to make it too thick, because if it's too thick, it'll be too heavy and too clunky. So it's a fine line. There's no real magic to doing it. It's a magic, you know, aesthetics. Somebody can paint 2 or 3 oil paintings, and one of them will be outstanding and one of them will be not very good. I can make 2 or 3 bowls, and one of them will be very good and one of them will be just ordinary. So you never know, but that's where the artistry comes in. But what to look for is the lift, the shape as it comes off the table, and the heft, the weight of it, which you feel. Now, there's a lot of variations, a lot of design elements. You've seen I put a lot of beads around the edge. That's a good thing to add if you want. That's quite nice. Another thing is like this. You can put grooves around here so that you can get, again, a tactile sensation of holding this with the grooves. You know, these are design elements that you add and decide on when you're making the bowl. And you know, you're never sure if they're going to work, and sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. And then the other thing to worry about, okay, well, where's the bowl here? The other thing to worry about is the rim of the bowl. Where was that bowl I was looking for? Let's look at this one here. The rim of the bowl. How do you finish this? Well, there's all sorts of ways to finish this. Some people put little, put an extended rim around it like this. Some people bend it over, so there's a slight curved inside. Some people, I like to just keep it very simple and plain like that, at a slight angle, so that the actual flat of the rim matches the curve of the bowl. But for example, here's one. It's got my turquoise on it as well. This is an ash bowl, and you see that they put quite a nice rim turning over into here. This is quite nice for salads and things, because it contains it within here. So there's always a bit of mystery about rims that are turning into the bowl. And here's another one I have. So there's variations on rims. So here's another one I have. Look at this. It's a nice piece of box elder. And I don't know when I did this one. I'll stop putting dates on them. Look at the grain here. Against my rules, this has actually, the pith is in here. And this one is relatively stable. So I guess it had dried out enough to do this. I'm taking a risk, but it worked out, because now the grain is spreading out like a ray. But you'll notice the rim here is curved in, and it actually gives a very nice feeling. You have to be careful, because if you don't do the rim nice, it's not good. The other thing that people want to put on bowls is a foot. So I have a bowl here with a foot on it. You can see this here. This is something that gives it lift off the table, right? Because it's got a foot. And this is quite nice. I occasionally, depending on what the bowl is like or what I'm doing, whatever, I will put a foot on the bowl like I did here. But in general, I prefer not to put a foot on the bowl. I prefer just to leave the bowl without a foot and let it lift off the table by itself. So it's, again, it's an aesthetic judgment that you make at the last minute. So when you look at these things, look at the curve. Is it a nice smooth curve, elegant curve? Does it have any decorations? Does it have grooves or beads? You don't really want to put that kind of decoration onto a bowl if the grain of the wood is very busy, because it just distracts, you lose it. But if it's a plain wood, then a bead or a groove will be quite attractive addition. So what was I saying? Anyway, so this is a footed bowl. Those are some of the design elements that we have to worry about. It's up to the artist to make that. We talked about the base. I should have mentioned this. The base of the bowl here, this bit here, the base of the bowl, it's not the foot, it's the base, should be about 1/4 the size of the diameter at the top. And that gives it a really nice look. If it's wider than that, it just sits there. It's clunky. It just sits on the table without that lift. So the rule of thumb is 1/3 to 1/4 of the diameter to make the bottom of the bowl. As I say, you can't, well, you can do the same with that, but you don't have quite the same freedom to do it with a footed bowl. This one, I don't know, I'll have to measure it. I'm not going to do that now, but you get the idea. All right. That's an hour, more or less. So I could go on. I've got more bowls downstairs, but I like to say that for myself, I'm in search of the perfect bowl. We've seen some really nice designs here, I think, but getting the perfection, the exact magic of lift and weight and decoration and the wood grain and all the rest of it, that's very elusive. And in fact, as you know, perfection is unattainable. So I keep trying. Here's one that I made, which actually is almost, I'm not going to say almost perfect, but it's very close. It's a very attractive bowl here. It's a piece of maple. It's relatively old maple, so there's some marking in here, dark marking. It's called spalted maple. It's very attractive wood, if you can get it. And this bowl has got the right size. It's got the right feel to it. There's very little decoration on it. The bottom is relatively narrow. It's very, you can't really tell from here, but it sits very nicely on this. So this is a really attractive bowl. I'd like to say an award-winning bowl, but I haven't been in any exhibitions, so I can't really say that. But I would put this into an exhibition for its elegance. Very simple. Very simple, but as you've just heard, to get here is not so easy. It's many, many years of practice and lots of fancy tools and stuff. All right, I'm going to stop there. I could go on, but I'm going to stop there. And I'm sure Mindy has been collecting questions as we're going forward. So Mindy, over to you. What do I have to do to get out of here?
You can stay because you're still going to be answering the questions.
Right.
But I think I will just make myself a pin also so you can see both of us. So I have a few questions that people have been sending. If people have more questions, you can go in the chat and send them to me, and I will relay them to Peter.
Yeah, and I can do that. I can answer your questions, offline later on, if you send them in, if you have thoughts, second thoughts.
I have kind of divided them into types of questions. So I'm going to ask the procedural questions first. How do you keep track of how long they're drying?
I date them all. It's a date here. So I know. The other way you can do it, and I have done this too, and you've heard it, you can weigh them every couple of weeks. And when the weight goes down to about 1/3 of its original weight, then you can say it's stable and you can do that. I can't be bothered weighing them, but if you're really anxious, you could. But I put a date on them. I got some bowls that are still 4 or 5 or 6 years old that I haven't turned down yet. They're pretty stable. Okay.
Okay. Next one is what kind of glue do you use to get the rings to stay together?
I use Gorilla White glue. It's very strong, cheap and cheerful. So I use that. Elmer's wood glue is fine too.
Let's see, people wanted to know what kind of finish do you put on the bowls?
That's a good question. When they're on the lathe and the raw wood, I seal the wood with a shellac. I sand that off. Then I use a lot of Danish oil with sanding. It gives it a very smooth finish. I have my own recipe of Danish oil, which is a trade secret. But if you ask me nicely, I could tell you. So my own Danish oil I put on, and I let that dry off the lathe. I go back in a week and I make sure any rough spots are cleaned up. And when it's all stable and dry, then I buff it up on a rotating wheel and polish it up. I use a wax finish to give it that nice shiny luster. I mean, I don't know if you can see this, but it's really shiny. It's very nice, and it's subtle. It's not. I don't like the gloss varnishes people put on. They're just too artificial looking. But this wax finish is enough. It's subtle enough that it works for me.
I have a few questions about maintenance of the bowls. How would you recommend to clean or maintain a bowl? And are there any foods that can't go into a wooden bowl because they might damage the wood?
No, not really. I mean, you don't want to have a lot of liquid. I wouldn't use it for soup, right? I wouldn't use it for, crushed blueberries or something like that. That's asking for trouble. But mainly you can use it for salads or fruits or, use potatoes, pastas and stuff will go in there quite happily. But when you're finished with it, when you finish the meal, rinse the bowl out with hot water, maybe a little bit of soap, just hot water and soap, and dry it very quickly. Obviously, you do not put these into the dishwasher.
Mm-hmm.
And if the bowl starts drying out, what I recommend for anybody who the bowl is drying out is that they use walnut oil. Walnut oil is a drying oil. You can get it in any high-end deli. I don't know if you can get it at McCaffrey's, but anyway, you can get walnut oil around, and you can get it on Amazon too. And walnut oil dries up, it soaks into the wood, dries up very quickly, and gives it a really nice rejuvenated finish. So that's what I recommend.
Okay. Let's see. People had questions about have you ever had any serious injuries because of the lathe, which looks to most of us to be kind of scary and dangerous.
Yeah, it's scary. I've had
all your fingers, but
no, not on my fingers. Because you keep them far, you got the tool, you're far away from. But I've had that bowl blow up in my face, but I'm always wearing a face mask. I tell you, I can't turn the lathe on without having that face mask on. So it's a problem. You have to be careful, but you just have to be careful.
Someone was asking about, do you ever burn the inside of the bowl out instead of scooping it?
Burn accidentally or with the tool or?
No, it says, can you say anything about burning out the inside? I was assuming that meant maybe a different method.
I haven't tried that. Sometimes not really. You can get burn marks from the tool if it's very hot, but you can just sand them or turn them off. Some people burn the outside of the bowl with a propane torch to give it a darker appearance. That's very attractive if you can get it right. You have to be careful. You don't want to burn the bowl. But actually hollowing it out by burning, I haven't seen that done. I mean, I'm sure it could be done if you did it carefully, but I haven't seen it done. I wouldn't really recommend it because you would have to control it so carefully. Otherwise you'd burn through the wall of the bowl.
Okay. Someone is asking about if you have well-dried wood because it's hard and it could crack, do you not use a one-stage process on that?
Good question. It depends on the wood, depends on how thick it is, it depends how, the state of the wood. But if it's really thick, you never know what the center is like. So I would actually turn it down, hollow it out as best I can to, relatively thick bowl and let it sit for a couple of weeks. You don't have to wait 6 months or anything, but wait a few weeks to see if it's going to change shape, because you never know. Once you've released the tension of the wood, it could change a little bit. And once it's stabilized after a few weeks, you can put it back and true it up. If it's very thin, if it's relatively thin wood, you can be probably sure that it's dry, and then you could just do a once turn on that. But you never know. And wood will always move in the winter and versus the summer. But these bowls are pretty stable. I don't have much issue with that when I'm finished with them. Good.
When did you first get interested in woodworking, and what was your learning journey?
Good question. Well, when I first moved to America, I needed furniture for my house, and I went out to look at some of the furniture stores, and they had really nice table, but it was $2,000. So I said to Louise, I could probably make a better one than that for a lot cheaper. So I went and I bought a table saw and I read a book or two. and started making furniture. And I mean, so now I can make furniture of any kind. And then I don't know why I was always attracted by bowls or lathes. So I just got one. I just eventually bit the bullet and got it. And I've never looked back. That was 35 years ago. So a friend of mine has the original first bowl I ever made. It's in California.
Someone's asking, where do you teach?
I don't teach wood turning very much. I do it, you know, by, if someone's really interested, they can approach me and we'll make a discussion about how to do it. It's a fair investment of time because, you know, it's not easy and there's a lot of work. And also you have to practice a lot. You know, I call it muscle memory. After a while, you know exactly what, you know, the feel of it, how it's going to go. So you have to be able to make that commitment. Yeah, I mean, I've taken a couple of people and got them to make a bowl from scratch, and they're very pleased with that, but that's all they want to do. So that's fine. So on request, we can discuss it.
Let's see if I've missed any. Louise suggests that I ask you about Willard's Wood Store.
Okay, Willard is a good question. Willard is a wood store. It's down in Lawrenceville. It's just off Baker's Basin Road. You have to Google it. It's a wood store down there. They have a wide selection of domestic woods of all thicknesses, oaks and ashes and so on. Really nice. Walnuts. I go there if I'm making furniture, I'll go there and get my wood for the furniture. You get a better choice, a cheaper choice than, for example, you can go to Home Depot and get some of this stuff, but it's not. Home Depot doesn't have the choice. It has oak and maple and maybe some poplar, but other than that, you know, if you want the really wide woods and stuff, they have it all down there. So Willard Brothers, I go there probably once a month to see what they have and check it out. They don't do bowl blanks, right? They have plain wood, you know, inch and a half thick that you can make a table from. They don't do bowl blanks. There's lots of suppliers. You can go online and you can, the American Association of Wood Turners, the AAW, the national organization, has a magazine that comes out every quarter. You can go there. They have a whole lot of advertising at the back where you can find all the supplies you want, all the tools, all the woods that you want. But again, I really don't buy wood for bowls like that. It's not worth it. You make one mistake and you've lost $50 or $100. It's not worth it.
Someone's asking if you could please spell the name of the unusual red wood that.
P-A-D-A-U-K.
Okay, I'll put that on there.
P-A-D-A-U, Paduk.
Paduk. Okay.
Yeah, it's from Asia somewhere. It's fairly reasonable. It's fairly common. I really like it. I like it in furniture. I use it for accents in furniture. If I'm making a table, I'll put a strip of that in it. It really gives it a nice highlight.
Someone's asking if there's such a thing as a hand lathe, not an electrical one.
It's a foot lathe with a treadle on it, like an old sewing machine with a string that goes up and turns it. Yes, there is. People do that.
Oh, it looks like I misspelled or I misheard.
No, that was good.
With a P, not a B.
P.
Oh, my error. Sorry. I spelled it the wrong way. I will fix that.
Okay. It's P-A-D-A-U-K, Paduk.
Yep.
There's variations on the spelling, but you can get the idea. That's right. That's it now. Yes.
Yeah. Let's see. What else do we have? How many discards are there for each final bowl?
Good question. Not that many. There's discards where you make a mistake and you just can't use it and you have to throw it in the wood pile, right? You have to burn it. Not many of those. I've done enough now that I can. I mean, here's one, for example. Oh, here's one. It's a really nice, I don't know if you can see this, a really nice oak bowl. But I was really heavy. It took me hours to get it to this beautiful shape here. And then I went right through the bottom. It's too thin down here. I was not happy, shall we say. So this goes, I couldn't do anything. So this goes, I cut it in half and it goes into the wood pile. I have a friend who has a wood stove and he gets bags of cutoffs.
Use the shavings for that too?
No, the shavings just go off to the, I've tried, nobody else wants them. But, you know, when I make a bowl like this, for example, then, you know, I grade them and, you know, they're really good, good, not so good, medium, and really poor. And, you know, I try to keep on the good side, but there's always some ones that are really not very good or poor. And I'm never quite sure what to do with them. Sometimes I cut them in half to see how well I did in making them, or I just put them in the basement and wait for someone to get married. I wouldn't give anybody who's getting married I make sure they got one of the better bowls. So I got a whole pile of rejects downstairs.
Anybody else have any questions they want to put into the chat? We've had some good questions.
If you have any further questions, just follow up with Mindy and she can email them to me. You can email them directly to me if you want, and I can answer them as best I can.
Would you like me to put your email?
Yeah, I put it up already, but put it as peter@sandsmith.com. Peter as. There you are. That's right.
All right.
Okay. So just send me any questions or any thoughts you have, or if you want to come and stroke some of the wood, that's fine.
Oh yeah.
Or we're going to have a wedding or a Thanksgiving or a housewarming. Talk to me.
So we have some
Huh?
great, so we have some great appreciation notes and thank yous and all those things, and it's been fantastic, very, very interesting.
Okay, my pleasure.
Peter, I want to thank you for your willingness to do this. This has been fascinating. It's like a whole other view into knowing you. I've been in your woodshed, but I've never seen this level of detail or artistry. So thank you for doing it, Mindy. Thank you for moderating. It's just been fascinating, and your work is beautiful. Thanks for sharing it with us.
It's taken me 35 years to get here, but that's okay. All right, thank you all. Okay,
all right, have a good night, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Bye.
So long.
Thank
Thanks
you,
again.
Peter.
Cheers.